Today on the Big Questions, fat cats, strikes, and today's wise men. Oh, very kind. Good morning. I'm Nicky Campbell. Welcome to the 10th series of the Big Questions. Today we're live from Brunel University, London. Welcome, everyone, to the Big Questions. This Wednesday is dubbed Fat Cat Day, when Britain's top bosses earned as much after 2.5 days' effort as the average UK worker gets for a whole year. That's £28,200 in real money. The chief executives of the top FTSE 100 companies earned, on average, just under £4 million. That's each, not between them. It's an hourly rate of over £1,000, and the top earner, Sir Martin Sorrell of the advertising agency WPP, banked over £70 million in 2015, according to the latest year figures available. The national living wage for over 25s is just £7.20 an hour. Are some people paid too much? Well, Wanda, you think that this has a really detrimental effect on society as a whole. Explain what you mean.
Well, we know that in countries where there is higher levels of inequality, such illustrated by this gap in pay, that there are higher levels of violence, higher levels of mental ill health, higher levels of physical ill health, and we know that there is poorer education. And this affects everybody, whether you're earning 77 million or 28,000.
This is the wealth discrepancy, isn't it? Why is that? Why does it have that effect on people? I mean, we're not talking about, you know, Adele and Ed Sheeran and Wayne Rooney. It's specifically people who are CEOs of companies, is it, that you're talking about?
But it's symptomatic of a society that is very highly divided. The UK is the 6th most unequal society in the OECD. And we know that the IMF, we know that the OECD and other organisations are saying that inequality is a really bad thing for society, and they're worried about it in economic terms as well.
It's about inequality, Harriet, isn't it?
Supposedly so. When you look at firms that have...
What do you mean, supposedly so?
Well, it depends whether you think inequality is a good or bad thing, or whether that means anything.
Let me rephrase the question. Is inequality a good or a bad thing?
I would ask to refrain to answer that, because I'd prefer to look at what it means for people actually with...
Interesting.
Yeah, okay. So if you look at firms that have higher levels of in-company inequality, they tend to have higher operational performance, and they also tend to have longer-term returns for shareholders. You know, what that means is that if you're in one of those firms as a low-paid worker, what you really want is security in your job and to know that there's talent at the top. So it doesn't necessarily matter how much the person at the top is being paid. What you don't want is for them to walk off and for you to be left with a company that isn't worth as much. You want to be working for a company whose share price is doing well, and you want to know that there's talent at the top. And you know, we live in a world where companies are getting bigger and bigger, so people are being paid more to run those companies because they're larger and they're having to hold more responsibility. So asking questions around, like, you know, is inequality a good or bad thing, doesn't necessarily tell us what's good for the worker on the ground. You know, if you did get rid of the top people because you cut their pay and they went elsewhere.
If their pay doesn't matter, why don't you cut their pay?
Because we don't know that that cutting pay actually improves performance, and most studies show that actually it doesn't do that. You know, capping pay isn't something that improves performance, and actually shareholders, you know, fund managers we know are getting more active as shareholders. They don't cut pay. They do lots of things like improve innovation, and they do more around you know, bringing out the value of the company through operational performance, but they don't cut pay to do that.
So it's more complex than the headline about inequality and equality. Wanda, come back.
Well, I mean, I think having been a very low-paid worker myself in times, and I'm sure many of us here have been, I wasn't thinking about the share price of the company. I wasn't thinking, when I was trying to make ends meet, that oh, it's all okay because, you know, if we keep the same boss at the top, he'll all look after us. I mean, I think that's a really paternalistic view. And I think it's not just about who is at the top. we know from different companies, whether they do well, whether these CEOs do well or whether they do badly, they are still being paid obscene amounts of money.
Obscene amounts of money? Are these amounts of money obscene?
Well, they're extremely high, but there are two questions here. The first is, are they being paid more than they're worth to the company? The second question is, are workers worse off as a result? Now, the answer to the first question is no. In general, CEOs matter enormously, and having a good CEO can mean the difference not just between profit and loss, but between life or death for a big company. And
well, support
now,
there, yeah.
Now, on the second point about whether the ordinary worker, I've had very, very low-paid jobs as well. I did not care at all what the share price was. I did care about job security. I did care about that company being competitive, and I cared about knowing next week or next month that my wages might be a bit higher. The way to get that is not to try and cap people at the top. It's not to drive away the talent from the UK. It's to get the best leaders and to get the best people at the bottom. And
But
I wish, if you just let me finish, I wish we would spend less time worrying about how much people at the top are paid and more time thinking about how to raise the wages of people at the bottom.
It's not an either-or situation. And when you look at some of the companies, if we look at Deliveroo, if we look at Sports Direct, these leaders are being paid a lot, but the conditions for the workers are absolutely appalling.
And getting rid of the talent at the top is not going to make things better for those workers.
No, this is just a nonsense, because we can see this huge corporate welfare coming in, a £40 billion annual subsidy to the financial services pensions industry, which is just being creamed off by these managers, by the people at the top, making huge bonuses, huge quantitative easing put into the banking system to rescue it. Meanwhile, the median wages haven't actually recovered to pre-financial crisis
Jonathan,
levels
the top 1%
People know
pay...
that this doesn't make sense, that they aren't seeing the benefits of these huge
The top 1% pay 27.5% of all income tax.
When you look at the deciles going up, 90% of people earn less than £50,000 in this country. It's a very, very small number right at the top who are creaming off excess profit through this corporate
Paying a lot
welfare.
of income tax. OK, audience in a second. Put your hands up. I'm going to come to you on this because I'm sure you might have a view. Stefan, one of the answers that has been suggested is to have workers on remuneration committees. So that would be a far more collegiate way of doing it. Make that argument.
Well, I think it would just be a much more realistic conversation based in the real experiences of the workforce. One of the reasons why these huge numbers come out at the end of the process is everyone around the table is used to these massive numbers. They're all very, very highly paid professionals. They're desensitized to the public reaction when we hear how much, 10 million, how many millions? So put representatives of the workforce in there to test these huge pay packets and see why they're being awarded.
They tried it in Germany.
Workers on
workers on boards,
yeah.
And the companies where it was tried that had far lower value than comparable companies where we didn't have workers.
How are you measuring value? Are you measuring it in terms of worker satisfaction, happy families, a good quality of life, or are you measuring it purely in terms of shareholder profit? Because that's the difference here. If you're talking about shareholder profit, yeah, squeeze the wages down, make big profits for people who invest, or are you talking about worker satisfaction, real jobs, good jobs for people where they can build a life?
I don't disagree with that per se, but I mean, when we come on to the responses, the response needs to be, well, let's get government to do something about it. That seems to be the best any of us can come up with.
But government's already having to do something about it because government is having to subsidise people. People are not earning enough in their wages and their take-home pay to exist in this country. So the government is having to pay in terms of tax credits or universal credit. They're having to top people up. People are going to food banks in this country. And these are people who are working. And I think that's a disgrace.
You're not going to change.
We also have, if I may, just Theresa May, if I may, is launching the shared society idea this week. And some people will say that this, £10 million a year, £50 million a year, whatever, is not exactly consonant with that. Let's go to the audience and see what you think. Any points there? Yeah, so green jumper, yeah.
Yes, I think that what Sam was
Quick
saying.
points, if you will. I'll get right round
The CEO
everyone.
makes big difference, but the thing is that what's the intention of the CEO? Are they there to make long-term benefit for the society? If you see 2008 crisis, all the CEO were there, and what happened after that? Also, the CEO comes now, they sack the people and make profit for the shareholders. Is the intention about the CEO? Are they there to make the difference in the society, or are they there to just kind of get their salaries and get shareholders return?
If the company does well, the workers do well, society does well. I suppose the counter-argument to that over there, with a pair of glasses on. Good morning.
Hi there.
Hi.
similar to that man's point just there, if a person is looking for a salary which is 300 times that of the average worker in this country, surely the only thing that you can be sure about that person is that they're greedy and selfish. And also, is that the sort of culture that you want to create within that company and within society as a whole?
Yeah, but the waistcoat. Are these people greedy and selfish? What if they do a lot of... Bill Gates, what if they do a lot of...
Well, you have to
Richard
quantify
Branson,
everything.
Philanthropy.
Everything has to be quantified.
It does.
As Theresa May said today, look, we need a fair society. When you look at British home stores, where it affected so many thousands of people by one greedy person. So no one minds CEOs who perform well earning lots of money, because obviously we need to make sure that we support that creativity. But what we're actually speaking about is where we see blatant corruption, and that we really need to fight against. And as the young lady at the front mentioned about food bank, at Homeschool Social Enterprise in Wednesbury, we have a food bank because our parents are so poor that they can't even afford the fees that we have, and the local authorities can't pay for the education that their educational plans are supposed to support. So we need a fair society. We need to make sure that we root out corruption, both in private and within local authorities who don't pay for the things that people at the bottom run of society need.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that point. Anyone else now before we throw some of that? Mick Whelan.
I'm rather stunned.
You're a union man. What are you stunned about?
Well, we talk about value. Now, I'm not against wealth creation. I'm not about people creating productivity, economic viability, contributing to the gross national product of the local
People
product.
doing well.
People doing well. But the tactic in these days and age is doing well off of the employees, not off the growth of the business, not off the investment, but how can we manufacture additional profits by taking it away from the people that we employ? Let's not self-develop them. Let's not create a society...
Should be shared about a bit.
It should be shared about. Don't we have 1.25 million kids between the ages of 16 and 24 that are not in full-time employment? Don't we have the biggest growth in our employment in the sector of 0 hours, which is typified by ASOS, Deliveroo and Sports Direct? Aren't people suffering in companies that do make massive profits, that do give massive remuneration and do not recognise the contribution of employees?
Sam.
The question here, the only thing that we're really debating is, do CEOs matter to the value of their firms?
No,
does a company... No, hang on. Does a company...
Justin, just a second.
Does a company that makes the right strategic decisions have an edge on its rivals? Now, all of the people with money on the line, all share investors, institutional investors, pension funds, all agree that when a good CEO leaves a firm, that firm becomes much less valuable. So Angela Arendt, who ran Burberry, was a brilliant CEO. When she stepped down suddenly, Burberry became £500 million less valuable. She was being paid a lot less than £500 million. A lot less.
Martin Sorrell is extraordinarily successful.
Martin Sorrell is a great example.
Is he worth 70 million?
I think he's probably worth more. Martin Sorrell built WPP. You know what it did before Martin Sorrell came along? It made shopping baskets. It's now one of the most powerful and important advertising firms, not just in the UK, but in the world. He built it from the ground up with his hands. Now, this is a very, very important person, and you want to have somebody like that leading your firm, whether you're a shareholder or a worker.
Vanda, in just a second, I'll be with you, Stefan, and Professor, I'll be with you as well. Justin, if I may. Vanda, what about that situation? If they say, right, we're going to drop your pay dramatically, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, and they say, OK, then, I'm going to take my laptop, leave this company, and go off to Geneva, and you lose that talent. What about that?
Well, I mean, I think it's very rare that it's a missus. I mean, if we look at FTSE 100 CEOs, there are about 6 women now, and that's another issue with this. This money...
But what if they go elsewhere? They say, you know, and you lose the talent.
What we have to... I mean, we are obsessed with talent. I mean, we're calling it talent. These people are working extremely hard. They may be extremely creative, and as somebody has already said, you know, what is Martin Sorrell doing for 77 million that he wouldn't do for 76?
He built
the problem is...
He built the company from nothing.
Great, but the problem is that business does not exist in isolation. Business, whether it's WPP, whether it's, you know, any other business you care to mention, it is built on the back of the education of its workers that we're all contributing to. It's built on the police being able to keep society safe so they can keep their businesses going. It's built on the efforts of nurses, of care workers, of people who look after our children while we can go to work. And these people are not seeing any benefit of this. Business does not exist in isolation.
Taxes are meant to look after that. Justin, does this not set a great example in our society? I could one day be making £70 million a year.
Well,
maybe not. As I said that, I kind of thought...
I have every confidence that if you were 70 million quid a year, you'd be giving it back to the people because you care more broadly.
Well,
the
allegedly.
disappointment
But is there an aspirational thing here at all?
No, the disappointment is we're discussing inequality, and voices in this audience said, well, inequality doesn't matter. Of course it matters. We're a society. And, you know, there was an argument made over here that the bigger your company, the more money you could get. Does that work for the NHS? Does that work for school sizes? Do teachers get paid more when they're teaching 30 quid? Of course, 30 children, of course they don't. And this failure to recognise that there's a contradiction between saying we're all citizens, we're all equal, we all get the vote, but you don't matter because you only earn 5 quid a week. It's a con. And if we really believe in society, we should be investing in everybody, irrespective. And it is sick.
Harriet, do you want to come back here?
You know, NHS worker teachers, no, they don't get as much, but they're not working for private companies. And I think then that begs the question, where does this end? If we're going to start somebody, and we haven't actually specified who needs to stick their finger in and cut CEO pay, do we also cut middle management pay? Because there's an awful lot of money that goes on middle managers, and you know, we're talking about the CEOs of private companies here. Of course, you know, a private company is a creature of statutes, you know, is a creature of the state.
But there's a knock-on effect in the public sector. Not all teachers are working for the state. Many teachers are working for private companies. With academisation, our education has been increasingly marketised. There is a market in education now, and we are seeing this have an impact, because then it forces up the wages of the wages in the private sector.
Stefan,
so
I haven't
vice
heard...
chancellors are earning more. Heads of academies are expecting to earn
Stefan,
more.
I haven't heard enough from you because you're, you know, a bit of an
People
expert
don't always say that.
on all. Here's the thing, if I may, and I know it's counterintuitive to put this point to you because you'll probably agree with it. We'll get somebody to respond to it while there's time. Very often it looks like pay and remuneration, all these bonuses go up, even if the company starts to fail in its performance. So that seems to be what's going on there.
Well, what's going on is a system that doesn't work. And the latest big set of research from Lancaster University Management School shows there's absolutely no link at all between vastly increased CEO pay packages and the return on capital invested over a 10-year.
You can understand if it does spectacularly well that the woman or the man gets a little bit more money.
There's so much mythology here. Who's actually doing the work? You know, the bigger a company, the more support the CEO has, the more senior managers there are, the more country managers and divisional managers there are. There should be less credit to a CEO for running a bigger company. And of course, they don't run it on their own. We don't want CEOs taking decisions on their own. They take decisions with the board and with their senior management teams. So this superhero vision of one human being apparently changing the destiny of a corporation operating in 100 companies with tens or hundreds of thousands of people doing the work every day and other managers, middle managers, actually taking the decisions where the action is, it's absolute fairy tale stuff. And we hype up these people, and they demand ever bigger packages, and they're just getting them because there's nothing in the system to stop it.
Well, let's take an example, a real-world example. Sony 10 years ago was much bigger than Samsung. Samsung decided to invest in smartphones, Sony didn't. Turned out that was a really, really good idea. Samsung is now a giant. Sony is getting worse and worse because of the strategic decision made by the person at the top. If I was Sony, I really, really would have wanted to have paid the extra money to get the right CEO who could have made that decision.
And change the culture of a Japanese one individual? That's not how Japanese businesses work.
But you take the point.
I don't think he does take the point.
Okay, well, you should. You should. Let's just put the numbers in perspective, because this gentleman made a good point. We have to quantify this.
Yeah.
For an average FTSE 100 company, the salary of the CEO is less than a 1,000th of their operating costs. It's a drop in the ocean in terms of their operating costs. Now, it's a lot to us. It's a lot in terms of anybody watching and the money we can ever make. But for a big, big company, it's a tiny amount to spend to get the best person for the job. Now, I think that if you think that Tim Cook isn't worth, the CEO of Apple, isn't worth 0.001% of Apple's costs, then I think that you maybe need to think a little bit more about what happens in big companies when they make the wrong decisions.
Mick, I'll be with you in a minute because you're very much involved in the next debate, if I may. But just as we close, Wanda, is it not the case that it's not so much what people get if they have a successful company and if they're kind of vibrant and energetic and dynamic business leaders. It's what people really get riled about is the evasion and tax evasion and the tax dodging. So if you've got somebody like, I don't know, Bill Gates, for example, who's making zillions, but he's doing a lot of philanthropy and a lot for society, do you not celebrate somebody like him?
Of course we do, and the world would be a very much poorer, literally, place if we didn't have such great philanthropists as that. But I think these are totally different issues. And if you look at someone like Warren Buffett, he's concerned about inequality, and it's a key evil of our society these days, that there is such a big gap. And we know that employees are very bothered about this. The business community is bothered about this. I mean, the CIPD research shows that 71% of employees are very concerned about bosses' pay and think it's too high. 59% of them are demotivated by that. So this is having an effect on productivity. It's also having an effect on our morale. If we value an average CEO at 324 times the income of a care worker, then that really shows that our society is putting profit before people.
Thank you very much. First debate of our new series, very interesting too. And if you've got something to say about it, log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions. Follow the link to where you can join in the discussion online or contribute on Twitter. Now, we're also debating live this morning at